Welcome to day 56 of 60 Days of Inspiration with Kathleen Gonzalez, and we're studying Living the Sacred Yes, Affirmations for Action by the Reverend Deborah Johnson. And today's reading is really quite amazing. Peace comes from within. My sense of peace is not based on external conditions and circumstances. It is not contingent upon what others are doing in their lives or what I think they are doing in mine. Peace always comes from within. I know who I am in spirit, and I choose a life that reflects that. Remembering the truth that I am one with God always brings me back to center. Being at peace with myself, I naturally transcend conflict and restlessness. Even in the midst of chaos and confusion, I am an ambassador of peace. My very presence facilitates reconciliation and goodwill. Let the peace on earth begin with me. And that is so needed right now. We're all in the midst of this amazing conversation about our culture and what's really going on here. The reality of life here in the United States, June 26th, 2020. And it's not good. And it's not good for a lot of people. And so I think those of us who meditate forget why we started. I mean, we remember why we keep going, because we do reach an inner peace. And however, it may take a few years of meditating or not. For me, it took a few years of meditating to get to the point where I always knew there was inner peace in here, that I knew it was there, that I knew I had that connection. And so to me, meditating has been one of several tools that I've used to come to peace with myself, but an extremely important one and an exciting one and a fun one and creative one. And so someone asked me what I thought was the number one tool for transcendence, and I said, meditating. Meditating, you can do anything, be anyone, be anywhere at any time. There are no rules in existence in meditating. And I think in meditating, we're the closest we can get to who we truly are. I mean, it's really being in touch with ourselves is meditating. And so peace comes from within. My sense of peace is not based on external conditions and circumstances. And that is really important, because right now there's a storm happening out there. And if we are dependent on that settling down, we're not going to be at peace for a long time. But if we know that we can have peace within, our peace is within us, then we can be in the midst of that storm and still be peaceful. And that is a huge aspect of health as well, because stress is corrosive to health, but peace is in alignment with health. It is not contingent upon what, and this is my sense of peace, first, is not based on external circumstances and conditions. It is not contingent upon what others are doing in their lives or what I think they are doing in mine. This reminds me of my codependent days. Not that I'm not codependent now, but I'm not as codependent. And I catch myself. And I understand this very, very thoroughly, because I used to I guess it was my sense of well-being really did depend on what others did or were not doing. And I would get all riled up and I would get manipulative and pushy and um, authoritarian with people because I wanted them to do what I wanted them to do. And luckily, I had an aha. And I realized that that was really not a good way to live. And it's really destructive to a relationship. And so I stopped doing that. But it's really important to understand that I think it's the third agreement of the four agreements. It's like, don't take anything personally. Really good agreement. Really good. Because then you don't, whatever somebody else is doing in their life or whatever you think they're doing in yours, if you don't take it personally, it really helps. It really helps take the charge off of things. It really helps us get to an inner peace. And if you just let people be who they are and do what they do for whatever reason they do it on a personal level, and then decide how to respond to that, that's where the inner peace can come from. But there is a certain amount of letting go. And as I say that, I'm thinking about how that would apply in terms of, changing our culture out of being a white supremacist culture into a truly egalitarian culture. And it may be that some people are just going to do what they're going to do. However, I think our response needs to not be personal to those people, but to respond to the culture as a whole and say that this is not acceptable, what we have, and we need to change it, but not necessarily be attached to any particular person changing or being able to accept that, but understand that overall we need to change the setup. Okay. Peace always comes from within. I know who I am in spirit, and I choose a life that reflects that. And that, I think, is where meditation comes in, because we truly get a sense of who we are in spirit when we're in meditation. And, there are also, I think, acts of service can give us a sense of who we are. Being in close relationship and loving relationship can give us a sense of who we are. Parenting can give us a sense of who we are. All those times when we kind of really get a sense of our true goodness and our true divinity, right? And choosing a life that reflects that. And so we don't buy into things. We don't let things go. We don't hang out with, one of the biggest lessons I ever had, one of the first lessons I think I ever learned from my teacher is hang out with uplifting people. It's like, hang out with uplifting people. That's such a great rule. I wouldn't even call it a rule. It's a teaching. It's a great teaching, because if you hang out with uplifting people, you'll have an uplifting life. And if you hang out with people who aren't uplifting, it's a drag, and sometimes those people are the person you're married to. Sometimes those people are your family. And if there aren't, and it's hard not to hang out with them, but get that to do for ourselves and have the life and be fully engaged in our lives, and to not be dependent for our inner peace on what these people do or don't do. But to hang out with people who uplift us. And then we all kind of are uplifted together. That is the way that that things change and shift. It's amazing. Okay. Remembering the truth that I am one with God always brings me back to center. Being at peace with myself, I naturally transcend conflict and restlessness. So remembering I am one with God, it brings us back to center. And from center, we can handle so much more. If you're centered and grounded, you can't, there's a physical test that if you're centered and grounded, it's sort of like you're flexible and somebody can bang into you and you just, you're just like this and you always come back to center. But if you're off balance and somebody hits you, you tumble down. So being at peace with myself, I naturally transcend conflict and restlessness. Even in the midst of chaos and confusion, I am an ambassador of peace. So are you the person who kind of sees the bright side? Are you the person who can find the good within the chaos? And reflect that and remind people of that and act from that, right? Even in the midst of chaos and confusion, I am an ambassador of peace. My very presence facilitates reconciliation and goodwill. And that speaks to the space that we hold. If we hold a space that's safe, everybody right now is like, oh, it's not safe to talk about racism, or it's not safe to talk about white supremacy, or it's not safe to talk about our culture being a white supremacist culture, because nobody intended that. We all grew up with the idea that the Constitution and all men are created equal. What we didn't know were the laws and the strategy that actually happened in the past that has its, it still has repercussions now, and there are parts of our culture that are still enforcing white supremacy that we don't have an actual realization of, and we're afraid to look at and we're afraid to think of. But it's really important that we do so that we can change it. So having a presence that is, I would say, empathetic and peaceful may create a space that allows more people to look at that, and may create a space where it doesn't have to be volatile. It can be conciliatory, right? And my very presence facilitates reconciliation and goodwill. Let peace on earth begin with me. And so by dedicating ourselves to being in touch with the peace within ourselves as a start, all we have control over is us. And so if we can bring ourselves to peace, which is not inaction, but it's a peacefulness, then the action we take can be perhaps more effective. And the change that we seek in the world can come sooner and with more grace and ease. So how will you get in touch with your inner peacefulness today? How will you get in touch with the peace that comes within? So peace comes from within. How will you get in touch with the peace that comes from within yourself today? See you tomorrow.